whiffed it on this one.
Oh my God. Are we really debating the morality of murder? I mean, that's what the play is about. Macbeth is a murderer.
Yeah, well, then I guess so am I. Right? I mean, I've killed people. What, I should just go blow my brains out because there's no hope for me, right? My soul's fucked because I was ordered to kill someone and I did it. You know, it doesn't make me a psycho.
Even for a dark comedy, that hits a little too close to home. Hello everyone, my name is Ryan, and I have opinions on HBO's Barry and the Toll of War. If you haven't seen HBO's Barry yet, go check it out right now. It's about a former soldier turned hitman who wants to try and turn his life around and get into acting. It stars and was co-created by Bill Hader of SNL fame and is an exceptional dark comedy. The show follows Hader as Barry Berkman and generally just focuses on the wacky, although dark, antics that may befall a former hitman turned actor. Old Marine buddies who want in on the action of your previous job, your former mob bosses putting hits out on you, detectives who start dating your acting coach while also investigating murders you may be connected to. Just an average week for the assassin turned thespian Barry Berkman block. What I think really sets HBO's Barry apart, however, is the depressingly realistic look it takes at our attitudes towards war, PTSD, soldiers, and redemption. Through Barry and some of his ex-military buddies, we see different types of people who have left a life of war and how they cope with it. We have Barry going through a very existential crisis, believing himself only capable of killing, but starting to want more out of life. One of his buddies has reacclimated to civilian life perfectly, while still holding fond memories of his time in the service, even keeping in touch with former squad members. Still another, who has grown bored with complacency, and a little bloodthirsty, seeking to join Barry's hitman activities to simulate the rush he felt in war. These different perspectives usually end up clashing, and the way they do paints a pretty decent idea about what HBO's Barry has to say about war. There are many scenes in the show, like the first clip I showed, that discuss the morality of war, through the lens of Barry himself. In the scene, we see Barry's turmoil over killing and how a history of blood on his hands can label him as a psycho. He vents his frustration at the class for weighing in on a subject they know little about or haven't experienced themselves. He also puts forward a pretty convincing argument about the nature of orders and responsibility in a conflict. The group, seemingly having forgotten about Barry's perspective as a former soldier in the moments before, are chastised and admit that the following of orders in a time of war doesn't necessarily label someone as a psychopath. They then immediately follow that up with the statement,
I think that you will all agree with me that if you kill outside of war, you're a fucking psycho. I mean, then you're irredeemable. Am I right?
So, we have Barry be reassured about his deepest fear that the only skill he thinks he has, killing, hasn't totally marred his soul, only to be immediately turned around and ripped out from under him, reinforcing the idea that he can never escape from his activities as a hitman. This conflict is beautiful because, much like Barry says about Macbeth, he truly feels like he has no other choice but to kill. Throughout the show, Barry is constantly demonstrated to be one of the world's best marksmen and a detached and efficient killing machine. It doesn't help that the only person Barry has always believed he can trust, his old family friend Fuchs, is a selfish, sleazy handler who convinces Barry that his talents are the only way for him to be accepted, and the one who originally steered Barry toward a life of crime. These ideas are also reinforced by what I consider to be the most powerful scene in the series, when Barry describes the story of his first kill to his acting class. This scene has one of the most poignant points any show has ever made about war in general. In it, Barry relays to the class how he killed 2 or 3 insurgents on a standard overlook shift. His acting coach has 2 other group mates act out the scene as he describes it, while we are also shown an actual flashback of the events. The contrast between these 2 depictions is where we understand the disconnect between the public's understanding of war and what is probably the most realistic portrayal of everyday soldiers I've ever seen. While the actors relay a dramatic scene of 2 soldiers unsure of what to do when observing suspicious activity, we see in actuality Barry at first be egged on by his squad to take a shot, not believing he could even hit the targets from the distance. Barry's classmates pantomime extreme grief over the tragedy of actually hitting the target, as that is how narratively in fiction these things tend to go. The hero struggles with the reality of the horrors they have had to commit while at war. However, we see Barry's squadmates are ecstatic over his performance, dismissing the loss of life as two dead sheep humpers, and also, ironically, calling Barry a stone-cold killer as a term of affection. In this, we see how Barry is first beginning to view his own self-worth in direct relation to his ability to kill. By this time in the story, though, Barry is foregoing the acceptance he has usually been met with from his military buddies and hardened criminals alike for his ability as a killer, and now is seeking acceptance from this new group of performers. When asked by his coach if the performance his classmates have put on is how it happened, he agrees, hoping to gain approval from the group as a tragic war veteran. As I said before, the most interesting thing about this scene for me is how realistically the soldiers are portrayed. I am a military brat myself, my dad being in the Navy, and I have also known many friends and coworkers who joined or had gotten out of the service. One such coworker regaled me many times during slow shifts with crazy antics he and his army squad got into, and it always sounded more like he was describing a movie version of a fraternity rather than a branch of armed forces. They pulled pranks on each other and fooled around with military-grade hardware in ways that were certainly dangerous. He even showed me a few Facebook albums he had of photos that they had taken when they were messing around with tanks and Humvees, riding atop them while in motion, or other such hijinks. It always gave me the distinct impression of a bunch of bored kids paid to babysit weapons-grade caches. I'm not criticizing nor applauding the behavior I just described to you, just as I did neither when it was first described to me. I just remember being blown away and a bit in disbelief at what I thought I knew about the military from shows and movies, and what my personal experience had imparted on me. And that's what I think was amazing about that scene in HBO's Barry. It shows a completely different side to our armed forces that is usually not portrayed in mainstream media. And not only does it give us this other perspective on the military, but it serves as a great commentary on the series' overall themes of redemption and finding one's place, and how it relates particularly to Barry's predicament. In war, you probably need to detach and distract yourself from the heaviness of the consequences surrounding you, but sometimes that may be just as harmful as wallowing in the reality of the situation itself.